Thank you for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. With the 2023 federal budget now introduced by Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, I'm pleased to have with us the Parliamentary Budget Officer back here as a guest. Yves Giroux, welcome back to Boom and Bust. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
I guess the obvious question is, what's your initial reaction to the budget?
Well, as an independent, non-partisan agent of Parliament, I don't comment on policies that are included in the budget. I comment, or I give usually an appreciation of the budget from a transparency perspective, from a fiscal sustainability perspective. So I provide that kind of information and analysis to parliamentarians and Canadians. So from that perspective, what was the highlight of the budget for me is the fact that the spending continues to go up compared to previous exercises. So we have seen in the budget tabled on Tuesday that spending is again going up compared to the fall economic statement in the fall of 2022, which was not that long ago, and compared to budget 2022, a year ago. So spending goes up, revenues continue to go up due to inflation, but also economic growth. And we also see that the savings measures that were announced in previous budgets, notably budget 2022, when we were told there would be strategic reviews, stay tuned for further details to be announced in the coming months. So these strategic reviews are still pushed back out in the future. So spending happens every year, but the savings for later. So that's
right.
A theme that we have seen in the last few budgets, and this budget is consistent with what we have seen in the past.
One of the things that was a surprise to me, let's put it that way, one of the biggest surprises for me was in the fall economic statement, there was still talk about fiscal probity, making sure that we're containing deficits, projecting 5 years out a mild surplus. That's all gone now. And in fact, the deficit for this fiscal year is kind of doubled, I think, from 20 billion projected to 40 billion. And there's no surplus in the out years, 5 years from now. Was that something that surprised you as well?
I can't say I was surprised. I was not surprised because the trend over the last several years for this government, if you don't take into consideration the pandemic spending, was that they're not focused on returning to balanced budgets. They were first elected in 2015 with the intent of having small deficits. I think the pandemic changed the definition of small deficits, and I think that indications point towards the fact that the government is comfortable with deficits of around $40 billion. And the fact that the fall economic statement indicated a return to balanced budgets or a small surplus, but the government did not play this up, did not highlight that in its communications, suggested that this was just temporary, and the government was very well aware of that when the fall economic statement was tabled last fall. So I was not surprised to see deficits going up and the prospect of balanced budgets being erased from the budget, because I don't think the government has that as a fiscal anchor. And in fact, their fiscal anchor tends to change over time.
Right. Growth projections, do you think they're realistic in the budget for GDP growth?
I think they are. So the growth for the economy as a whole, they are at 0.3% for the current year, if my memory serves me well, which is not that far off from our own projection that we released earlier in March. So, and in the subsequent years, there's not a big difference between the government's projections included in the budget and our own that were tabled a couple of weeks ago. So there's not that big of a delta there, and who knows what will happen with the prospect of a recession. I personally don't think a recession is unavoidable, so we could well end up going through 2023 without a recession, but a recession is also quite possible. But most people that people talk to or that have an interest or follow the economy are saying that if there is a recession,
Right.
it will very probably be a shallow one.